I met an alien girl at the edge of time, and she asked me to remember her. The stars looked different from Station Kepler, and nobody could explain why Jake Carter noticed it first, during his morning shift, checking the observation panels. But he didn't say anything because everyone would think he was crazy again, like they did when he reported the strange signals 3 months ago that turned out to be nothing but cosmic dust. The station floated at the edge of explored space where human territory met the unknown, and Jake was just a maintenance guy who fixed broken things and kept the life support running. He wasn't supposed to discover anything important, but that morning when he looked out the viewport he saw her. She was floating, in space without a suit. Jake blinked hard, thinking his eyes were playing tricks after another double shift, but she was still there. A young woman drifting past the station like she was swimming through water instead of the deadly vacuum. Her skin had a faint blue shimmer like moonlight on ocean waves, and her hair moved around her head in slow spirals that defied physics. He pressed his hand against the cold glass, and she turned to look at him. Her eyes were gold like twin suns, and when she smiled, Jake felt something shift in his chest, like his heart remembered a song it had never learned. She raised one hand and pressed it against the viewport, matching his palm through the barrier. And suddenly Jake wasn't on the station anymore. He was standing in a field of silver grass under 3 moons, and she was beside him wearing a dress that looked like it was woven from starlight. "Welcome, Jake," she said, and her voice sounded like music from a dream you can't quite remember after waking. "How do you know my name?" he asked. "I have always known you," she said. "We have met 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways." Jake wanted to ask what she meant, but the field disappeared and he was back at the viewport, gasping for air. His hand still pressed against the glass. She was gone, and for a moment he wondered if he had imagined everything, but his palm was warm like he had been holding something precious. That night Jake couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, those impossible gold eyes, and feeling like he had forgotten something vitally important. He got up and went to the observation deck, even though his shift was over, and there she was, again floating outside the station, waiting. This time Jake didn't hesitate. He grabbed an emergency suit and went to the airlock. His training screamed that this was insane, that you don't just jump into space because you saw something strange. But his heart knew something. His brain didn't, and he trusted it more. The airlock cycled, and Jake stepped into the void. She was there immediately, taking his gloved hand, and suddenly they weren't floating anymore. They were standing in a crystal city that stretched forever in all directions, towers of light and geometry that hurt to look at directly. "My name is Lyra," she said, "and this is my home, or what remains of it." "What happened here?" Jake asked, looking at the empty streets. "Time," she said simply. "Time happened, and now it is ending." Jake didn't understand, but Lyra led him through the city, showing him wonders that made his scientist brain weep. Beautiful impossibilities that shouldn't exist, crystalline fountains that flowed upward, gardens where flowers bloomed backwards, pools that reflected places instead of images. "My people discovered how to move through time," she explained, "but we made a mistake. We went too far forward to the place where everything ends, and when we came back we brought the ending with us." She showed him then the truth of her civilization, how they had been millions once spread across 100 worlds, masters of time and space, but the ending followed them back like a shadow, consuming everything they touched. Planets blinked out of existence, stars went cold, entire galaxies forgot they had ever burned. "We tried to run," she said, "but you cannot run from the end. It comes for everything eventually. So we chose to stop instead, to stand still and let it take us. But I wanted to do one thing first." "What?" Jake asked. "I wanted to be remembered." Lyra took his hand again and showed him memories that weren't his own. He saw her people in their golden age building wonders that spanned dimensions. He saw them discover time travel and the joy it brought. He saw the first signs of the ending, the way reality itself began to unravel. At the edges he saw the desperate attempts to fix what they had broken, and the slow acceptance that some mistakes cannot be unmade. He saw Lyra as a child learning to dance between moments, as a scientist discovering the fatal flaw in their time engines, as a leader trying to save her people, as a lone survivor making a final choice. "I have been searching through time," she said, "looking for someone who would remember, truly remember, not just know the facts, but feel the weight of what we were, I have met you in 100 different moments, Jake Carter, in timelines that no longer exist, and in every single one you remembered me. Why me? Jake asked. Because you see things others don't, she said. Because you have a heart that holds on to beauty. Even when everything tells you to let go, because you are kind enough to remember a dying girl at the edge of time. The crystal city began to fade, then dissolving like sugar in water. It is happening, she said. The ending has found me here. This is my last moment. Jake felt panic rise in his chest. No, wait, there has to be something we can do, some way to stop it. There isn't, she said gently. But that is okay. I'm not afraid. I just need you to promise me something. Anything, Jake said. Remember me, she said. Remember that my people existed. Remember that we built beautiful things and made terrible mistakes. Remember that we loved and laughed and danced between the stars. Remember that I found you here at the end of everything, and that for one moment I was not alone. I promise, Jake said. And he meant it with every particle of his being. Lyra smiled, then a smile of pure joy and relief, and she kissed him once softly. And Jake felt time itself shudder around them. She pressed something into his hand, a small crystal that pulsed with warm light. This is the last piece of my world, she said. Keep it safe, and when you look at it, remember. Then she was gone. Jake stood in the void, holding the crystal, tears freezing on his face inside his helmet. He was back outside station, Kepler floating alone, but he wasn't alone, not really, because he carried Lyra inside him now. All her people's history and beauty and sorrow pressed into his heart like a precious weight. He made his way back to the airlock, climbed inside, and cycled through. When he took off his helmet, his supervisor, Amy Brooks, was waiting, looking furious. Carter, where the hell have you been? She demanded. You disappeared for 6 hours without authorization. Sorry, Jake said. But he wasn't sorry. He was holding the crystal in his pocket, feeling it pulse with warmth. That night, Jake sat at his desk and began to write. He wrote about Lyra and her people, about their crystal cities and time engines, about their mistake and their ending. He wrote until his hands cramped and his eyes burned, and then he wrote more. The other station crew thought he was crazy again, obsessed with an impossible story about aliens who never existed. But Jake didn't care. He kept writing, and more importantly, he kept remembering. Remembered the way Lyra smiled. He remembered the sound of silver grass moving in an alien wind. He remembered the taste of fruit from trees that grew in 5 dimensions. He remembered star maps of galaxies that had been unmade. He remembered songs in languages that time itself had forgotten. And because Jake remembered, Lyra's people didn't truly die. Years later, when humanity finally developed their own time engines and began exploring the temporal frontier, they found echoes of Lyra's civilization, scattered through discarded timelines, ruins of crystal cities, and fragments of impossible technology. The scientists were baffled because none of it should exist. The timeline didn't support it. But there it was anyway. Real because Jake Carter remembered. It real because one maintenance worker on a forgotten station had loved a dying girl enough to carry her entire civilization forward in his heart. Real because memory is its own kind of time travel, and some things are too beautiful to let fade completely. Jake was an old man now, still living on Station Kepler, still maintaining the equipment, still looking out the viewports at strange stars, and sometimes late at night he would hold the crystal Lyra gave him and feel her there in his memory. Her gold eyes and starlight dress, her gentle voice telling him about wonders beyond comprehension. And he would smile because he had kept his promise. He remembered. And somewhere in the space between moments, in the gaps where time forgets to flow, Lyra smiled too, because she was not forgotten. She lived on in Jake Carter's memories, carried forward into a future her people never reached, saved by the simplest human magic of all, love, and the stubborn refusal to let go of beautiful things. The universe was vast and cold and full of endings, but it also held maintenance workers who saw impossible girls and remembered them. Maintenance workers who kept promises even when everything else faded away, and that Jake thought, looking out at the stars, that was worth remembering too.